The first time the town said she would not last the winter. The wind seemed to agree, because it came screaming down from the ridge, slipped through coat seams, shook every loose shutter in Bitter Creek, and turned the valley white before the season had even settled in. There she stood anyway, one woman beside a broken wagon, one dead horse in the traces, one trunk at her feet, staring at a place that looked less like land and more like a warning. Men on Harlan's porch muttered that nobody came this far unless they were running, and nobody stayed unless they had nowhere left to go. She heard them, lifted her chin, and walked straight into the mercantile, asking for flour, lamp oil, nails, and lumber with a voice thin from travel but still sharp enough to cut pride. Old Harlan named the price, shook his head, and said the cabin she had bought uphill belonged to a dead trapper whose roof leaked whenever the clouds thought about rain. But she paid anyway, gathered what she could carry, and stepped back into the cold like a woman too tired to fear it. While the town measured her odds, one man at the edge of the boardwalk said nothing at all. Caleb Mercer, rancher, widower, the sort of man who spoke little because grief had already said too much for him. His wife had been buried 3 winters earlier, his young son the winter after that, and since then he had worked like a man who believed labor might fill a silence if he made it large enough. He looked at the stranger's red hands, the stubborn set of her mouth, the way she refused to shiver in public, and something in him tightened. Some storms do not begin in the sky. They begin when 2 wounded people decide not to look away. Her name was Elisa Bell, and she gave it like a challenge. A widow, she said, though there was no ring on her hand and no softness in the word. By sunset, she was dragging warped boards through mud to a cabin barely fit for rats. One window gone, chimney cracked, door hanging crooked, and Caleb crossed the road without asking permission, took the heaviest stack from her arms, and carried it uphill. Inside, he looked once around and said, "You cannot sleep here tonight." She answered that she had slept in worse, but a gust came through the missing pane and blew out the lamp, as if proving him right. Even she laughed at that, bitter and short, and Caleb went to work. He nailed a grain sack over the window, braced the chimney with stone, patched enough roof to keep out the moon, then chopped wood in the dark until a pile rose beside her door. He left after that, but not for long. Over the next days he came with fence posts, cured meat, once a milk cow with more kindness than beauty, never staying long, never talking much, yet always returning, while the rest of Bitter Creek turned her survival into a wager. They said she was too fine-handed for frontier life. Though her palms were blistered raw, they said she was hiding something, which was true enough to make the lie dangerous. And they said Caleb was a fool for helping her, but he did not stop. Eliza learned the sound of his boots before she learned the shape of his smile. And Caleb learned that her silence was not emptiness. It was discipline. She had taught school once. She admitted over dough and lamplight. 30 children, 1 stove, never enough books. Then her mother died. Her money vanished. And the road west became the only thing left. In a hard land, tenderness does not arrive with flowers. It arrives carrying firewood, feed sacks, and the nerve to come back tomorrow. Then the first real blizzard struck, sudden and vicious. A white wall swallowing pasture road, and sky in the same hungry breath. Caleb had just finished checking the south herd when he noticed there was no smoke rising from Eliza's chimney. Not a thread, not a spark, and fear moved through him so fast it felt older than thought. He saddled at once, rode into the storm, bent low over his horse, and found her cabin half buried already. The chimney had split, snow packed against the door, the roof groaning under ice. He forced his way inside and found her on the floor near the hearth. Conscious but weak, one ankle twisted, fingers blue from trying to coax flame from wet wood. She looked more angry than frightened, which somehow made the sight worse. He wrapped her in a blanket, lifted her to the bed, broke apart a chair for tinder and fought the fire to life until the room glowed with that first savage heat, the kind that sounds like mercy when death has been close enough to hear breathing. He warmed broth, bound her ankle, and when she whispered that he should go before the drifts trapped him too, he fed another log to the blaze and said only, "No." Outside, the storm kept battering the walls. Inside, the darkness shrank, and on the second night, with the world erased beyond the cabin, the truth finally stepped closer than either of them had meant to let it. Eliza said Simon Bell was not dead, only gone, a gambler, a drinker, and a cruel man whenever luck stopped lying to him. He had sold her father's land using forged papers, beaten her when she protested, and laughed when she spoke of the law. So she left before dawn one morning with money hidden in her coat hem and rode until shame and distance nearly felt the same. Then she stared into the flames and said what the town already believed. No man stays for winter, not the kind who makes vows. Not the kind who builds homes, not after seeing what another man has already broken. Caleb sat quiet a long while. Then, said his wife had died in childbirth, the baby with her. And since then, he had lived like a man standing beside his own grave. Helping Eliza had not felt noble, he said. It had felt necessary. Sometimes the heart opens without a kiss. Sometimes it opens because two people tell the truth while a storm tries to kill them. When the sky cleared on the fourth morning, the valley came back in hard blue light. Beautiful and brutal, the milk cow was dead. One side of Elisa's lean-to had collapsed, and Bitter Creek itself had taken losses all down the creek bed. Roofs gone, livestock frozen, one child near lung fever, and disaster did what decency had failed to do. It humbled everyone. On Sunday, Caleb walked Elisa into church with her hand tucked through his arm, and for the first time the town looked at her without amusement. But mercy had barely begun when Sheriff Nolan arrived with news from Dodge. Simon Bell had been seen heading west, asking after a dark-haired woman with gray eyes, buying whiskey, asking too many questions, carrying the mean patience of a man who believes his wife is property delayed. The church stiffened. Nolan advised Elisa to leave again. Farther this time, anywhere beyond Simon's trail. She stood very still at Caleb's side, worn down by travel, weather, and fear. And Caleb understood all at once that her whole life had become one long retreat. So he said no. She would stay at the ranch until Bell showed. And if Bell showed, he would answer to him. The room went silent enough to hear boots scrape plank. Because everyone in Bitter Creek knew Caleb Mercer did not speak large words by accident. The town had bet on winter to finish her. Now her past was riding in to try. Simon Bell arrived 2 days later under a lead-colored sky. Handsome in the spoiled way of fruit, about to rot, polished boots, expensive coat, smile like a card trick. 2 hard men rode behind him. And he crossed Mercerland as if possession were only a matter of tone. Eliza saw him from the porch and went pale. Caleb stepped beside her, not touching, just there. Steady as the post at her shoulder, Simon dismounted grinning. Called her wife, called her thief, called the frontier a childish performance now that a real man had come to fetch what was his. Then his eyes found Caleb and sharpened at once. Half the valley had already gathered by then, Nolan and 2 deputies among them. Because no town that feeds on rumor misses the chance to watch truth arrive. Simon produced papers, Eliza answered with her voice. She told them what he had done, the land sold, the beatings hidden, the debts paid with her inheritance and her blood. And because truth carries a weight counterfeit never quite finds, the yard shifted around her. Neighbors who had doubted her now stared at Simon like he was something dragged from a well. He lunged for her anyway, maybe from habit, maybe from panic. But Caleb met him halfway with a blow that dropped him into the mud before the curse left his mouth. One hired man reached for a gun. Nolan fired first and shot the weapon from his hand. The other backed down fast. Courage being rare among men who rent theirs by the hour. Simon rose spitting red and swore he would take what belonged to him. And Caleb said, "She was never yours. Not then, not now, not ever." And the words hit harder than the fist had. Because every woman in that yard knew how seldom a man spoke like that, where others could hear. Justice does not always wear a badge. Sometimes it stands in the mud and says the one thing everyone else was too afraid to say. Simon left Bitter Creek in irons, cursing until the deputies dragged him out of sight. And after that the town, embarrassed by its own cruelty, tried in small ways to make itself useful. Harlan sent lumber to mend Eliza's chimney. Mrs. Avery brought soup and blankets. The preacher's wife offered curtains. None of it erased the winter's first whispers, but regret still warms better than pride. Snow kept falling through the month, softer now. And Caleb repaired the cabin beam by beam until it stood stronger than before. When he finished, he placed the new key in Eliza's hand. But she folded his fingers back over it and said she was tired of living in places that were hers only on paper. What she wanted now was somewhere shared in truth. His face changed then, slowly, like dawn over frost. And in late January, they married with ice on the church windows, and half the town crowded inside to witness. What hardship had failed to destroy? There was no grand display, only vows spoken steady. A ring warmed first in Caleb's palm so the cold would not bite her skin. And afterward a fire built high in the ranch house while neighbors stamped snow from their boots and laughter. Filled rooms that had been empty too long. Outside winter still ruled the valley, fierce, white, and old. But inside, Caleb laid another log on the flames, and Eliza stood beside him. No longer a stranger, no longer a wager, and when the wind struck the walls like a memory that refused to die, he slipped his hand into hers and stayed, just as he had stayed that first blizzard night, because Bitter Creek had been wrong about the only thing that mattered. Winter is not what drives a man away, fear is. And Caleb Mercer had finally found something worth outlasting the cold for.